Hello, I'm Matt Appleby from Vegan Organic Network's Growing Green International magazine. And today I'm talking to Laurence Candy, who's a farmer who transformed a farm in Dorset from a dairy farm to a plant-based operation back in 2019. And his decision was influenced by a loss of cows to bovine TB and a desire to protect wildlife. He now grows oats, wheat and fava beans and is looking at intercropping. And Lawrence got in touch with Von when he was listening to a Vegan Organic Network question time. And he's given us a really great insight into how to change from that type of mixed farming into becoming a stock-free farmer. So welcome, Lawrence.
Hi, Matt. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. All right. Now, we have been looking into subsidies for stock-free farmers, and the
Yeah.
history of this goes back a long time, doesn't it? So, can you
Yes.
tell us a bit about, public money for farming, and why is that a controversial area?
Yeah, it's always been a contentious issue, certainly among the press, about why should public money be given to farmers. They sort of look upon it as a sort of a cushioning effect. So fiscal policy came about post-World War II, actually, because as everyone's aware, in World War II, we had food rationing. Food was in very short supply, and it also highlighted the fact that we had a weak domestic agricultural policy. So we were totally reliant on importing food from the US. And obviously, as people know, a lot of our shipping was torpedoed by the German Navy, hence the reason for food shortages. So post World War II in 1947, under the Attlee government, it was decided to bring in the Agricultural Act. The aims obviously were to produce a plentiful and cheap supply of domestic food, also to alleviate the geopolitical situation. At the time, we had a lot of tensions between us and the US on food supply issues. Also, post World War II, society also had the right to a better lifestyle. Also, there was the threat of communism coming to the UK, certainly in mainland Europe. So the government knew it had to change the situation for just society in general pretty quickly. So that's the reason why we started to give public money to farmers.
Let's bring it a bit more up to date. So what's
Yes,
been going on more recently? I mean, that's like 70, 80 years ago. So
yes.
more recently, how have the government been subsidising farmers? I mean, post EU, for instance.
Obviously, the big shake-up came in with Brexit. So in 2020, we left the EU. So after a period from 1973, agricultural policy was under the Common Agricultural Policy. So our government was under the umbrella of the European scheme. So everything was decided at Brussels. And so therefore all policy making was determined there. So come 2020, we then had the opportunity to re-establish a domestic agricultural policy, and it was under the name of ELMS, which is the Environmental Land Management Scheme. So it is politically a revolutionary scheme. The sole ethos was to spend public money on public goods. Therefore, we were doing away with production subsidies or the right for farmers to receive money to produce food. So it was totally an environmentally based system. There are three pillars to the ELM scheme. The SFI, which is the Sustainable Farming Incentive. This is pays farmers for about approximately 100 options available now to look after the environment, the water, the air, the soil, and also people. Then the second pillar is local nature recovery. So this is where the government instructs farmers to start introducing more environmentally friendly practices to see environmental improvements at a sort of a local or regional level. Then we have the national strategy, which was basically large-scale rewilding, the reinstallation of peat bogs, for example, and also the large-scale uplift of tree planting. So that's basically the current scheme we have at the moment under those 3 pillars. So yes, it's certainly a world-class and an innovative scheme. It ticks all the boxes for the environmentalists.
I wanted
Yes.
to ask you, Laurence, how successful do you think that's been? Because it's been quite controversial with the NFU, for instance, the farming union, using more wildlife, more land. So what's your view?
Things had to change. I think the NFU is always a tiny bit behind the curve. You've got to remember the NFU is a union at the end of the day. So therefore it's representing all the sectors, all the agricultural sectors. So it was a bit steeped in the past, so to speak. At the time, I distinctly remember why food wasn't a public good. But for some reason, under the economic definition of public goods, food production is not included. So basically, a public good is a commodity service which is used by society without reducing its availability to others. So specifically, we're talking about the air, the water, and the soil management. This is basically key principles. But regards to policy, because there was a lot of concern under the government spending review that the agricultural budget, which was approximately 2.8 billion, was going to be substantially reduced. There was a lot of campaigning up until the spending review back in July. No, in June actually. So the outcome is it's shown the ELM scheme is politically robust because it's very hard in politics to start to reduce environmental payments. It won't buy with the voters because environmental management is obviously important to the voters. So this is the main reason why we've managed to secure a budget of about 2.6 to 2.7 billion up until fiscal years ending in 2030. So it has proved the correct policy.
What threats and barriers and opportunities do you see for stock-free farming amongst all this wider background?
Well, the immediate threats for farming at the moment is that in March, the SFI scheme was suspended because although the farmers could apply for an infinite amount of money, there were actually 100 options available. So it was possible to adopt at least 20 or 30 options on farms. The budget was technically overspent. So the present Labour government has decided to draw a red line under this policy and say, right, we've got to cap the expenditure on the SFI, the Sustainable Farming Incentive, because we've only got a certain amount to spend. Plant-based farmers, or the arable farmers in particular, were using the SFI as a valuable top-up scheme for their income. In the combinable and arable crop sector at present, we have a genuine economic crisis. Crop prices are at an all-time low. Our incomes have more than halved within the last 5 years. So to make up that shortfall, farmers were simply starting to take land out of production and into these environmental schemes, because at the end of the day, the noises from Westminster were for farmers to adopt these environmental schemes. And what happened was the farmers listened and said, yes, we agree with you. We're going to make our businesses more environmentally sustainable. So they just adopted the principles of the scheme. So it's been a victim of its own success, so to speak. So at the moment, for the plant-based farming sector, it's a very unpredictable time because we've had our funding literally just frozen. Specifically for the farmers who are yet to apply for the schemes. So they have no way of getting into it. And the earliest we think now will be 2026. But there is talk of capping the amount of money. I think it could be capped at, say, something like £10,000 to £15,000 per farm. I'll just give you the example of my farm, Northwood Farm. I've applied for £48,000 of environmental schemes payments and did get accepted. I beat the deadline. But as a proportion of my income, it's equivalent to 50% of my grain sales. So I can honestly say, as a stock-free organic farmer, it's an important source of income. It's critical, to be honest.
No, that's fascinating insight. And you mentioned your own farm there,
Yeah.
Northwood in Dorset. So can we drill down a bit more about what you grow there, how it all works, on a day-to-day basis, and who you sell
Yeah.
it to? How does it all work for you?
Background was I've come from a long generation of dairy farmers. My father, my grandfather, my great grandfather were all dairy farmers. So, yes, in 2021, we took the brave leap, I should say, out of livestock farming. I should say at that point, I just completed organic conversion. So I was technically a full organic farm under the Soil Association. Obviously, the cows went to Hillside Animal Sanctuary, and I started the 2 to 3 year process of converting all the grassland to combinable crops. So at present, I have wheat, oats, and I will be sowing some fava beans as intercrops this autumn. So those are my 3 main crops. As I've already said, under the SFI scheme, I should say I've got a brook or small little river which runs the boundary of the farm, and that traditionally was all river meadow ground. I've converted that to rewilding under the SFI options. So that's in the process of the rewilding. So yeah, I'm in my fourth harvest now. Yeah, I'm sort of getting used to the fact of, well, harvest, I should say, is about literally just 10 days away now. It's been a steep learning curve, so I'm sort of getting more confident as I go along. So
I was
yeah.
going to say, has it all been plain sailing? Like, what has been the tricky ones, the tricky bits of it?
Well, on the technical side, it's obviously having to learn. Although I was growing crops for the dairy in the past, growing crops organically is certainly a lot harder than conventional farming. You've obviously got to really start to think about your rotations, because under organic system we can't apply synthetic inputs, particularly nitrogen. So we have to make sure the nitrogen cycle works, which is by growing legume and pulses. So it's getting that to fit in. We sort of grow approximately 3 years of cereals and then look for a great break crop. I've adopted the NUM-free legume fallow option, and also the intercrop or companion crop option, which is sowing legumes with cereals. So that's how I'm going about it. But yeah, it's certainly been a steep learning curve. On the financial side, I've had the opportunity cost of the lost dairy and beef income. Technically, my financial output is more than halved. So I've had to sort of overcome the cash flow problems, because I should say, as most organic farms who grow cereals are mixed farms, so that means they would have a livestock enterprise. So that livestock enterprise is obviously helping to fund the regenerative phase of the organic cycle, and also it helps with liquidity and cash flow issues as well. So with crops, from sowing, I've literally waiting 9 to 10 months before harvest. And then once I've harvested it, I may not then realize it's up to the buyer when they call in the loads of grain or pulses. So I could be waiting again after harvest up to another 6 months for my paycheck. So yes, it's certainly from a cash flow point of view, going from a monthly income to a or yearly income, it has been hard. And I've got to say that the banks aren't supportive, or the main high street banks do not like farmers transitioning out of livestock, because they know it's a valuable source of liquidity. So yeah, there's been quite a few barriers, I've got to be honest. Yeah.
Okay, who are you selling to?
At the moment, I'm in a organic grain co-op, which is called Organic Arable. I sell my oats to Whites, which are based in Northern Ireland. They're one of the country's largest oat miller. So they make different oat products for porridge, for obviously oat milk and muesli bars. The organic oat market is doing very well at the moment. There's strong growth. So I'm trying to optimize as much of my acreage to growing oats as possible, because it's a guaranteed income. Regarding my wheat, again, this is what a lot of people don't realize. Wheat needs a lot of nitrogen to get to the correct protein, 12% protein for bread milling. So if my wheat doesn't meet the 12% threshold, then I have to look for alternative markets, what we call the low protein market, which is quite saturated at the moment. So that's basically for plain flour biscuits. I've sold to marriages down in the east of the country and also to doves, which some people have may heard of. So those are my main customers. And I have to sell wheat also to animal feed compounders.
So that is a little bit of a compromise for you.
I've been working with a lot of vegan NGOs or farm transition organizations. Well, actually, quite a few around the world now. Australia, Japan, I'm still in contact with. Obviously, been working with Rebecca Knowles from Stockfree Farming. This is the main points I've put down, which I want Von and all the vegan NGOs to start to address. I think they're very vocal on, obviously, and rightly so, on what's wrong with animal agriculture. But this is the importance of animal agriculture to me, specifically as a stock-free organic farm. Number one, it's a valuable alternative market for crops which don't make contract specifications. It also, these crops, animal feed crops, provide critical mass to arable businesses. What I mean by this is it's providing a known quantity both in yield and price. So therefore, yield and price on an arable farm determines the total financial output. So my total income is determined by the ability to grow crops for the animal feed market. My business would simply be a lot smaller if we did not have animal agriculture. So what we have to ask is, well, we need to create alternative markets. So one of the obvious alternative markets is the biofuel market. Give you an example, 40% of the US maize crop goes into bioethanol production. We only have one bioethanol plant in this country. And unfortunately, with the new Trump tariffs trade agreement with the US, one of the climb downs is we now have to set bioethanol from the US. Therefore, there's a strong probability that the UK's only bioethanol plants will be closing. So therefore, this valuable alternative market won't be available to farmers. That's already causing concerns within the grain markets. It's taken at least £10 a tonne off the feed wheat price. Feed wheat price at the moment is only about 150 to 160 pounds a tonne, which is extremely low. I'll just give you an example. I looked this up just to show you how low prices are relative to inflation. I was born in 1972 and the wheat price was £28 a tonne. If I apply the Bank of England's inflation tracker, that equates to £296 a tonne in today's money. So as you see, that's literally just half the price of where we should be. That sort of shows you the critical stage we are at with the combinable crop industry here in the UK. It subsidises the grain and pulse market. So how does this come about? I'll give you an example. In the organic sector, the price I received for my animal feed wheat last year was £300 a tonne. The amount I received for the low protein, the biscuit flour market was £320 a tonne. That's just £20 a tonne more for grain which meets human consumption criteria. That's 2p per kilo. So when you go and buy your kilo bag of flour from the supermarket, I am only receiving 2p more than what I received for animal feed. So can you honestly say animal agriculture is not subsidizing food for human consumption? No, you can't.
You can't. So what can be done to address that, do you think?
Well, let's keep positive. I've noticed with the plant-based treaty here in the UK and globally, their three-pronged approach, three policies. They're going, first is redirect, second is relinquish, and the third policy is restore. Well, if you look at those three key policies, that's been totally met by the ELM scheme, by the UK. This confirms the previous Conservative UK government got it completely correct. This satisfies all the critics of animal agriculture and the advocates of plant-based agriculture. It satisfies those three key demands. What I want to see from Vaughan is a lot of political pressure. We'll soon be up to the party conference season. So what I want to see is a lot of lobbying done by the NGOs of saying we must fully reinstate the agricultural budget for the ELM scheme, which is approximately £3 billion, but ideally £4.5 billion. If we just spent an additional £1.5 billion on UK agriculture, we could meet a lot of these outcomes quite easily. We only were 2 years into the scheme, and it was working very successfully. So we just got to reinstate the funding. The second policy I'd like to see is we have to simply take plant-based or combinable crop farmers off the commodity agricultural system. You cannot restore the environment under the free market supply and demand economic system. It just does not work. We have to adopt true cost accounting. What do I mean by true cost accounting? True cost accounting financially factors in all the hidden or indirect costs of food production systems, be it plant-based or animal-based. Economists call this externalities. So for every pound we spend on food in this country, it costs us at least another pound in environmental damage. How can anyone credibly argue for not increasing the agricultural budget? As I know I'm just stating this very simply and slowly, but it just shows you how absurd this situation is. The externalities of being calculated, actually, someone has tried to work this out. Actually, I think the Sustainable Food Trust do a calculation, and I think the cost is globally it's more than $1 trillion. So it just shows you how pathetic it is. But we're worried about spending another £1.5 billion in this country.
That's fascinating insight, and it's great policy notes for us to take and to take forward. Now, you mentioned before about banks not really backing farmers who want to transition. I mean, are there any other barriers, or do you see other people transitioning? I mean, do you recommend it? You're the one who's done it.
This is the problem. I don't think that the organisations I've worked with, this is not meant to be critical. You've got to remember, farmers already know the financial situation of the plant-based sector. They know horticulture, UK horticulture is very difficult to get in, and the returns can be very small. It's a high-risk situation. For mixed farmers to transition out of livestock, you are committing a high-risk financial strategy. The banks will not like you for doing it. It's unprofessional for a farmer to transition out of livestock. I know we've got to address the ethical and moral concerns, but we have to work with bank managers and the system at the end of the day. At the moment, animal agriculture is just too integrated in the viability of plant-based farming. It's as simple as that. To answer that question, no, I think, yes, we do get one or two farmers like me for personal reasons. I think most farmers actually who leave livestock farming, we just had a very large high-tech dairy farm give up. And the reasons were personal. His son didn't want to come into the dairy industry, and also he was having a problem employing people to work on the farm as well. So there will always be reasons why farmers give up animal agriculture, but from a financial perspective, it is extremely high risk, and that's why we have to address these key policy issues. If we want to see more farmers transitioning, then we've got to put the framework in place. It's not simply a question of just criticizing the animal industry. Farmers will respect critics if they show the options or viable options. It's not simply enough just to criticize, and that's basically the key take-home message.
Excellent. Well, that sums it all up pretty well. It's been great talking to you, Laurence, and getting all those insights. Is there anything else you want to add about burning issues you want to get out there, or have we covered it all for today? Do you reckon?
Well, I think we've covered most of it. We got to just keep positive. I hope people sort of use my transition as a case study. I know there are people who sort of make reference to the Northwood Farm. So yeah, technically, the farm has been successful. I'm doing it. Now I've established these markets. But as I say, I'm totally reliant on government policy and also the consumer. The organic market is only just over 2%. Consumers can buy more organic, or we now need to create the veganic market. So how we go about that, I'm not sure. I think certainly by everyone coming together and cooperating, I think that's the key wish I'd like to make, is we've got to come together now and sort of start to create the veganic market. I will say my story did make a lot on social media. It has come to a lot of people's attention. So hopefully it's putting the Biocyclic and the Vegan standards out there. People are starting to talk about this on the internet, so which is encouraging, because 2 to 3 years ago, most people wouldn't have known what veganic farming is. We're sort of on the cusp of a transformation. I certainly think within the next 10 years, something good will come about from this. So it's just getting everyone to work together in one direction.
Brilliant. Okay, well, it's been great talking to you, Laurence. We've got some amazing insights there, all in just half an hour. I think you've summed it all up pretty well. So I'm Matt Appleby from Vegan Organic Network, and I've been with Laurence Candy from Northwood Farm, and we've been talking about government subsidies and the future of transitioning from dairy into stock-free farming. And hopefully we will see you again soon. So thanks very much, and goodbye until next time.